Good morning and welcome to another episode of Josh and Pat. Today, we start out with the dog days of summer. It's the dog days of the MLB season. And with that comes one of the biggest failures in base. After top three, they're now 4 games under 500. They are truly one of the most expensive teams in baseball with some of the worst return on investment. The Padres now are slipping and looking to try to change. Jack, filling in for Josh Kline today. Jack, let's ask you, where do the Padres go from here?
Well, to give you some numbers, Padres are fourth in the NL West. They are 9.5 games back from the Diamondbacks of all teams. The Diamondbacks in previous years, most recent years, have been horrible, god awful, and it looks like they've almost swapped spots with the Padres in their division.
Yes. So at this point, if I'm the San Diego Padres, I'm cleaning house. I know that you're coming off an NLCS appearance. I know that you guys have a lot of money, but we got to reach. I'm trading Juan Soto at this year's headline if I'm the San Diego Padres.
Really? That is a bold statement.
I'm trading him, and this is why I'm doing it, Jack. Look, there's still a year and a half left on Juan Soto's deal. There's still value if you trade him now. Last year, we saw you got to the NLCS. You finally overcame the Dodgers. That's great. Juan Soto so far this year has not been productive, but he still holds tremendous value because everybody knows how of a player he can be and will be. Here's the problem with the San Diego Padres. They've spent a lot of money for guys like Xander Bogaerts, Manny Machado, Juan Soto. They're even paying a fair amount of money to. They got guys like Jake Cronenworth on the roster. But when you start looking around at the other pieces, they're just like the Phoenix Suns. They don't have a great bench. They are lackluster in some areas. I mean, let's be honest, Jack. It's having Gary Sanchez and Nelson Cruz and Rougned Odor as staples in your lineup is not what a playoff team does.
Well, comparing him to the Suns, it must be just where the sun shines. The sun that heat stroke must just get to him. I don't know, but going back, where do you see all these players? I mean, you say they still got a lot of value. They just don't want to pay him, want to do a full rebuild. Where do you send Soto? Where do you think his value really shines in the league?
Well, Soto, he'd have to go to a big budget market because here's what I look at it from the Padres' perspective. I go, you had a really good farm system. The farm system isn't terrible now, but you traded away a lot of your prospects to get Soto, and you gave it to the Nationals. If you can get somewhat of a return for that and build back up some of these prestige prospects back into your system, you'll have areas where you no longer have to have Rougned Odor, Nelson Cruz, and Gary Sanchez on your major league roster at some point. That'll help, okay? And second off, where do you trade Soto? It's going to be big players. I mean, obviously, you have to look at the New York Mets. I know that they're having a down year, but they're somebody that would be extremely interested. That's just what Uncle Stevie does, Jack. Uncle Stevie loves to pay.
Where the Padres end up, I have no idea. This is not what I made. The NL West is completely backwards when it comes to what I predicted their final standings looking like. The Rockies are pretty much where I had them. Padres, we'll see. Dodgers being third, a little strange. Giants, okay. Diamondbacks at the top, still can't get over that. So I don't know. The Padres, we'll see where they end up.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. So the other big disappointment this year is the New York Mets. I mean, they have the third worst record in baseball since mid-May, and they're just not changing things around. They got the polar bear. Hey, great. He's raking. He's going off. He's leading the league in home runs, but unfortunately, home runs do not mean baseball wins. and they are slipping in the standings. At this point, we're looking at a major sell-off that could come for the Mets, but a major sell-off does not mean the end of contention. Error for the Mets. Jack, where do the Mets go from here?
I don't know. Again, looking at numbers, if off the top of your head, if you're not looking at it, how many games back would you say they are from first? Just top of your first impression.
From first in the NL East, I would say they're probably, 14 games back?
15. You were close. 15 games back, one of the worst records in baseball, like you said. And also one of the biggest payrolls in baseball, funny enough. They're paying huge contracts up in New York. I don't know if that smoke got to them a few weeks ago coming from Canada, just
Canadian
messed up their
smoke.
record. I just don't know what's going on.
You got to be careful. Look, here's the thing about the Mets. This is before Uncle Stevie was really fully taking over. That Francisco Lindor contract is going to go down as maybe one of the worst in baseball. Francisco Lindor is providing not nearly enough value for a 13-year, $300+ million guy. And you start looking around at the other guys on the roster. There needs to be sweeping changes. I hate to say this, but I love Buck Showalter. I think he's a great manager. Here's the only thing that comes with Buck Showalter. He trusts too much in his guys. And what I mean by that is the coaching staff has to change. There needs to be sweeping changes on the coaching staff because clearly it's not working. It's not working. You've got guys like Marte that are struggling to put up the same numbers that they once were. Lindor's struggling. Jeff McNeil's having a down year. You got Brandon Nimmo. They're all struggling. So at some point you look around and you go, well, this team was a perennial team that was on the verge of possibly making a deep run last year. I know they get out in the wild card round, but you start looking around and it's like, I don't know what's wrong because on paper, these guys are good.
On paper and on payroll and basing off their last season stats and their little run they had, I would have thought that they would be competing with the Braves for the NL East this entire year. Like game to game, season to season, every series has to be a win for either the Braves or the Mets so they can stay ahead of one another. Having them at fourth going into July is, I don't know if anyone could have predicted that. Like such a huge fall off. Like, do you honestly think being in New York with, you look at the Yankees, you even go to the NBA, looking at the Knicks, is there some kind of pressure in New York? Do they just like fall apart? Is the city cursed? Is the status of being in the Big Apple just crumbling to players, do you think, when they get there?
No, because here's what you got to look at. The Knicks have some of the worst ownership in professional sports, okay, which has to do with the Rangers and such. The Islanders, well, they'll make the occasional run in the NHL, okay? Then you start looking at basketball. The Brooklyn Nets, yeah, they may be cursed because their franchise totally changed once they traded for Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, and it clearly didn't work out for them, right? The New York Yankees, for some reason, refused to get rid of Brian Cashman, which at this point, I mean, we see how many rings he has. He's got a lot of rings there in New York, so, I mean, I don't know why you would get rid of him. And then the New York Mets, Uncle Stevie, they may actually be just a cursed franchise. So I think you're right, Jack.
We'll see where the Mets end up going into the dog days. I don't know. I mean, the Nationals, I'm confident they'll stay at the bottom. Phillies and Marlins are a toss-up for 2 and 3. Marlins could maybe overtake the Braves, maybe the Phillies. I don't know. The Braves are just, you look at their first spot and then the Marlins at second. They're 6 games back going into the dog days. We'll see. But moving into the NL Central, the Cincinnati Reds have been tearing it up recently. What is going on over there in the Midwest?
I mean, Ellie De La Cruz, man, what a guy. And then the next thing you know, you get the Canadian back, you get Joey Votto. He's coming into the picture, and you're like, hey, this guy can still play. Because let's be honest, everyone forgot about Joey Votto. Like, we forgot about him. But he comes back from the injury. He's back. Couldn't even tell you what he was injured from, but he's back, and the Reds are fun. And what's great about this is they're a couple years ahead of schedule, but the NL Central, with the Cardinals being so bad this year, the NL Central is wide open. So, 85
the NL Central,
wins.
The NL Central reminds me of the NL East pre-pandemic, like 2018, 2019. If that makes sense. I mean, you've got the Reds kind of coming out of nowhere. For the most part, I'll admit the NL Central looks about how I would have predicted it, other than the Reds. Like, you got the Brewers at second, just half a game back. Cardinals being at the bottom, obviously. Pirates at fourth. But I don't know. I could see them being really, really fun to watch. I mean, the Reds already are fun to watch. Like you said, they've got those cool black and red City Connect jerseys. That Brave series was some of the best baseball I've watched all year so far. It's there. You're right. Saying they're wide open is a good statement, I'd say.
Yeah, it's wide open. And if you're a Cincinnati fan, like, does it get more fun than when your electric prospects get called up and they're performing? I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they can do this for the remainder of the season. But nonetheless, I mean, what was happening in the performance in Cincinnati, minus the COVID year with Trevor Bauer on the mound and making it to the wild card series, they really haven't had success since Dusty Baker was there. Okay, and we're talking that's a decade from now. So, I mean, just embrace it, have fun, just enjoy the ride. That's all I gotta say.
Right. I mean, and no, I'm not putting too much pressure on the Reds. I mean, they might, speaking too early, they're on a little bit of a hot streak. We'll see if it lasts, but let it last. Have some fun. Let the kids play, as MLB keeps using in their marketing. I want to see it happen.
Okay, so now on to the American League, Jack. And one of the biggest surprises in the American League is a team that did spend millions of dollars on the New York Mets. It's the Texas Rangers. Now, some would argue it took them a year, because last year they were terrible after they spent a bunch of money. It took them a year to correct it, but here they are. And the Texas Rangers look like they're going to maybe run away with the AL West.
Texas Rangers are hot. They are 47-30, first in the AL West, obviously, like you said. Astros are behind them, 5.5 games back. They finally got that Dallas payroll money, and they're making some happen with it. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. The Astros, they're going to perennial be good. Perennial, be a top team in the AL West. The surprise for me in this division is the Mariners. They're struggling. They put it together. They called up the prospects last year. They had Julio performing well, and it seems like they've just regressed a little bit. But that being said, if they just start performing well and they switch into fifth gear any second from now, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, I mean, they're only 2 games away from positive. They're 37-39, 9.5 games back. But the Astros, Angels, and Mariners, they're all pretty close within each other. I mean, you got 5.5 games back with the Astros, then just 6 with the Angels, and like I said, 9.5 with the Mariners. I mean, those are in flux, I'd say, in the AL West. I mean, you look at the bottom with the Athletics, you've got, reverse boycotts in the stadium. They're 28.5 games back. We don't have to worry talking about them. But I don't know. I'd say that those middle 3 spots are up for grabs in any way, shape, or form.
And so it'll be interesting to watch where the West goes from there. Now, the AL East is the best division in baseball. Every single team in the AL East is above 500 as of this morning. The Boston Red Sox, sitting in last place, are 40-39. And you start looking around, not everyone from the division can make the playoffs. So right now, Rays, hottest team in baseball, even though they've cooled off a little bit of late, but they're still best record in baseball. The Orioles still up there. The Yankees having a solid year, along with the Toronto Blue Jays right there in the middle of the division. I think it's going to shake out that 4 teams from the AL East make the playoffs.
If you made that statement preseason, I would have called you crazy. But looking at it now, I mean, you can't argue that. The Rays obviously they were so hot, and they still are at the beginning of the season. What did they get up to? Like 12-0, 14-0 debut? I can't even remember. Huge debut where they were just couldn't lose. Obviously a little bit biased coming from my friend over here with the Orioles saying this is the best division in baseball, but the numbers don't lie. I mean, little surpriser with the Red Sox and Yankees being above 500. I would have said they'd be having a little bit of a worse season. Blue Jays being kind of third, I would have guessed ish. But I mean, looking at it, I can't argue that they're I don't know, they're pretty nice.
I am a little bit concerned about the Orioles. They got to add some guys at the deadline to really make a push. But as of right now, I think they're firmly in a position to make the playoffs.
I don't know. I wouldn't be too worried about the Orioles in their current position.
Great job
I mean,
this morning, Josh.
Sorry, say that one more time.
No, I was trying to change the subject, and I said Josh instead of Jack, and that shows. Jack, you're doing a great job this morning.
So, I wouldn't be too worried about the Orioles.
Yeah,
to be honest.
I mean, we'll see how the Orioles do.
I mean, they're only 5 games ahead of the Yankees, which is pretty solid lead, and only 4.5 back from the Rays. So second place is a good spot to be in. 47-29 record is not one to be ashamed of for sure.
Would not be complaining. Okay, on to our last division here in midseason. Like, you can really call it a preview. It's not really a review. I guess midseason show. I mean, that's what we're going. Anyway, AL Central. No one in this division deserves to make the playoffs. No one in the AL Central deserves to make the playoffs.
It's a bold statement. It's a bold statement that I agree with because, I mean, only one team's 500. You've got the Kansas City Royals who are just falling apart, 22-56, 17.5 back, almost as bad as the Athletics, even though I like making fun of the Athletics. The Athletics are still 11 games behind the Royals if you look at it.
Oh, okay, but here's the thing, Jack, right? So when we start looking at the Athletics, they sold everybody off. They're at the very beginning of the rebuild, okay? They're developing the farm system. They're bringing it up. They're going to start calling up these prospects at the end of this year, into next year, and they'll gradually try to start turning the corner, right? For the Kansas City Royals, Bobby Witt Jr.'s up. The rest of the farm system's solid, maybe above average, but they're not at the very beginning of this rebuild. They're at a point where it looks like the rebuild is teetering into having just to completely demolish it and start over.
Interesting. Okay. Well, is it a failed rebuild or a rebuild that's kind of just taking a pit stop, do you think?
Well, it's been too long of a pit stop because people thought the Royals were going to maybe make a little bit of a jump last year. It didn't happen. So people said, oh, maybe it was just a regressing year. It was a down year for the organization, which happens. We see it all the time. This year, they've been pathetic. Okay? I don't know where you go with the Royals as an organization because you can't just fully go into another rebuild. Yeah, and they're not going to spend money. So I guess you just got to maybe I don't know. I don't know where you go.
So, I mean, it's pretty safe to say that their spot in last is kind of locked in, being 17.5 back. What do you think about the middle three, though? You got the Guardians, Tigers, and White Sox.
Yeah, White Sox started the year absolutely terrible. And since then, they have played just average. So in the AL Central, that means they have gained ground. I still think it's probably the Guardians' Division 2 win because they're the team that made the jump last year. They have probably the best roster in the division, I would say. And so I would still go with the Guardians to win the division. And that means they would get a home playoff series.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, you look at the Twins, they're barely above 500. They're 40-39. Have a little bit better record at home and a little bit better away, but that's, I think, just because they played more games. So, I don't know. The AL Central is kind of up for grabs, and I'd say between the top three, maybe the White Sox and Royals you could consider out, unless the White Sox went on some crazy run. We'll see. But I don't know. I'm obviously a National League guy. You're an American League guy, so it's good to get some perspective on that.
Hashtag perspective. Right. So, Jack, I think this is going to do it for us today. A little bit different show today for Josh and Pat. We've reached the middle of summer, and over the weekend there was absolutely no sports news. So we decided to, hey, let's go to the bread and butter. Let's go to the MLB. Let's talk some baseball. And always good to have Jack filling in here. Okay, this is a point in the show where we tell you, DM us on Instagram. You can win a free mug, also a $10 McDonald's gift card. Jack, thank you so much for filling in on Josh and Pat again this morning.
Always happy to be here, for sure. Thank you.
And so that'll do it. We'll be back. Check Picks and Pancakes for the latest information on everything in sports news. And with that, we will be back Friday morning. It's Josh and Pat. Peace.